So, Anthony, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you, Jessa. I love your podcast, so it's an honor to be here with you.
Well, thanks. Tell me about this book you've written and what has driven you to this topic of
Mhm.
relationships and love and suffering, right?
Yeah, okay, it started just before, like a week before the pandemic. I had spent 10 years researching a book on how our screens affect us and our relationships. And I published a book called Screened In: The Art of Living Free in the Digital Age. And I kind of felt like there was so much in there about the negative effects on screens on our relationships, and I kind of felt like, okay, I really want to write a book now about like how do we construct relationships?
Mm,
What are the best ways to construct relationships, and what sort of gets in the way of our best laid plans? And I think also part of it is that, and this permeates Screened In as well as Love and Suffering. So I do a lot of research on loneliness in organizations. I'm actually one of the top two researchers in the world right now on that topic, and I think it's because I felt lonely at different times in my life,
mm.
and so I've always just been curious. Okay, like, well, what does it take to really build a solid relationship that can endure? And that really led to the researching some of the core themes in Love and Suffering. Like so Love and Suffering has four plateaus in this sort of what's called the I call the love progression model. So there's acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, and then love. And then each so I was researching all the psychological literature I could find on those topics, and then each of those plateaus has an obstacle that has to be overcome. So we overcome suffering to reach a state of acceptance. We overcome resentment to reach a state of forgiveness. We overcome judgment to reach gratitude, and then finally we overcome what I call incarceration to reach love. So yeah, so that all of that the research and then the stories of many people that I'd coached and that I knew about who had overcome really tremendous odds to invite more, forgiveness and gratitude and love into their lives. So
Yeah.
yeah, I really enjoyed writing it actually.
So I'm sort of piqued, curiosity piqued by the idea of loneliness in organizations, but how does that mirror like loneliness in relationship? Like I remember a client ages ago,
Hmm.
early in my work, it was so impactful. He said, I've never felt lonelier than lying in bed next to my wife, which I just, broke my heart.
Oh, that's sad. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
very
And
sad.
is loneliness part of what you're thinking about in love relationships?
Yeah, absolutely. So, okay, so to tie it from as you asked, like from loneliness in organizations to loneliness in relationships. So, I've coached a lot of Fortune 500 CEOs, senior leaders, uh, G20 cabinet ministers, mayors, uh, the directors of most of the world's largest nonprofits like CARE, Save the Children, and World Wildlife Fund and so forth. And what I've found is that every leader I've ever coached, the major challenge they come to see me that they're trying to work on, it stems from someone in their life that they were never able to forgive.
Hmm.
So this is kind of what became the impetus also in sort of the design of Love and Suffering. And then so your client, I think it's your client you said who had this, because I know you're a therapist, right? And
Right.
so this client who said never felt lonelier than next to their wife. That's really sad,
Yeah.
because we can feel, many of us feel lonely around other people, but the reason that's particularly sad is that it's emblematic of a kind of values incongruence that he has with his wife, where that's where we tend to feel the loneliest, is where we're with other people, but we don't feel in sync. We feel
Mm,
disconnected.
yeah.
And so loneliness is interesting because think of it this way: at the center you have aloneness, which is also called objective isolation. So it's
Okay.
just like if you're sleeping in a bed alone tonight, you're alone. You're objectively
Right.
alone,
Right.
right? So, but then there's the way we think about being alone is what causes loneliness to emerge. So if we start to have negative thoughts related to being alone, so then we start to not just be alone, but to feel alone.
Okay.
And so loneliness is the way I define it is loneliness is a negative, distressing emotion associated with being alone. Well, solitude is on the, so we got aloneness here, you got loneliness over here on the negative side. On the positive side is solitude.
Right.
So if loneliness is a negative, distressing emotion associated with being alone, solitude is a positive, strengthening emotion associated with being alone. But
Right.
just as like one person's trash is another person's treasure, it's not being alone that's causing the loneliness. It's how we think about being alone.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But yet, even more impactful is feeling alone when you're not objectively alone, right? Like that's the
Exactly.
thing that gets really painful. Is like I'm here in the midst of people or with my partner, and yet I feel
Yeah, so
disconnected and alone.
you could be alone and not feel alone. You could not be alone and feel alone, like you're
Yeah,
mentioning.
yeah.
And I think this happens a lot. You know, I actually think there's been a huge, it's not just loneliness that's peaked. I mean, literally, if we look at loneliness, it's just increased by astronomical proportions the last 15 years or so. So actually and it's a global phenomenon. I mean, in the United States, the Cigna study found in January 2018, 43% of adult Americans were lonely based on the UCLA loneliness scale.
Wow,
2 years later, January 2020, 2 months before the pandemic started, that percentage had leaped from 43% to 61%. They did the same survey again over 20,000 US adults. So over 3 in 5 American adults are lonely now.
wow.
And
And
this
that's
is
before the
that's
pandemic.
before the pandemic, and
Yeah.
this is global, Jessa. Like
Wow.
In the UK, the former Prime Minister Theresa May hired a minister for loneliness. Why did she do that? It came after a study that found that 8 million British people were lonely, and that British children, I'm not making this up, British children spend less time outside than prison inmates.
Wow.
Okay, now that's the US and Britain, but it's global. If you look in Japan, uh, so most of us, when we think about like which citizens in society would be kind of like dangerous and you want to avoid, I don't think many people would mention elderly Japanese people. I certainly wouldn't,
Right.
right? Well, if you look over the last 15 years, the rate of incarceration of Japanese senior citizens, 75 years and older, has quadrupled.
Wow.
And you would ask like, well, how on earth is that
Why? Yeah,
possible?
right. What are
Because
they doing?
because well, they're still not dangerous. That's the good thing. But what
Yeah.
they're doing is they're going to the corner store and they're shoplifting something small like a bag of rice or like a piece of fruit so that they can be arrested and put in jail. That's taken very seriously in Japan
Yeah.
and put in prison because at least in prison there's someone to talk to. At
Oh,
least they're part
wow.
of a community. There's literally, this went viral. An 87-year-old Japanese man put a sign on a bus stop, which near his prefecture, which said, "I'm 87. I have no family. Will anyone take me?"
Wow.
And no one did, and he passed away 2 months later.
Oh,
So yeah, so loneliness so when we look at intimate relationships, it really, you can feel lonelier when you're in an intimate relationship and you don't feel connected with your partner. You don't, and I know this is a lot about what your podcast is all about. You don't feel
right.
connected. You don't feel aligned in values. And then I think what one thing that I've taken an interest in, and I'm writing another book about, is gender and relationships, and loneliness comes in there too. And one thing that we're finding is that loneliness among older men is just skyrocketing. So
Yeah.
the most significant cause of death of British men 45 and older today is suicide.
Yeah.
And we're also seeing in the US and all around the world these kind of increasing deaths of despair among middle-aged and older age men. And I think one part of the reason is that if you look at like the difference between husband and wives, not always the case, but if you look across large samples, you find women as wives tend to have friends.
Yeah.
Husbands tend to have their wives' friends' husbands.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
just like that couple you mentioned where there's not that values congruence. And then the men are
Right.
kind of talked to almost, it's almost Saturday Night Live had this wonderful skit about like the sort of man park where the girlfriends and wives are taking the men to the park and trying to get them to socialize. And and so it's literally like, John, Meet
Yeah.
Fred. Fred likes barbecuing hamburgers too.
Fred's about your age. Maybe you'd get
Yeah,
along, right?
exactly. And
Oh,
and
I'm
and
gonna
the
have to
guys
look
don't
that
know
up.
if it's more insulting or depressing, but it's
Oh,
yeah. So this, of course, is affecting relationships pretty severely.
yeah. I mean, I know that I don't know what the statistics are exactly, but older men are, the rate of suicide is much higher in the US too. I mean, it's a really
Exactly.
vulnerable
Exactly.
group, right? Yeah. So when you're talking about true connection in an intimate relationship, and you mentioned all four plateaus, and I didn't write them all down, but like, is it, is there a crucial stage there for feeling connected? I imagine you have to have sort of all four, but
Well, okay, so the four are acceptance, forgiveness, gratitude, and love. So I would say let's get to one of the more controversial parts of the book, which I think is also I think one of the most important for connection.
okay.
So of course, forgiveness is a good thing, right? Like we all say, like, feeling like you've been wronged by someone and and that you forgive them. So imagine someone says to you, uh, says to you, you know, this has really been hard for me. You've really made my life really difficult, but I want you to know that I forgive you. Like, I don't know about you, but I would rather not hear those words
Yeah,
from
right.
someone.
It feels pretty judgy, like you're a piece of shit, but I guess
Exactly.
I like, that's okay. Yeah.
No, exactly, exactly. So this is the thing. Okay, so forgiveness on the whole is it's a good state to reach, right? And actually, like many think it's the highest form of love. Like Ronald Niebuhr had this thing like forgiveness is the highest form of love, and I really disagree with that because, well, first of all, forgiveness is a good thing because the opposite is resentment, and resentment is comes
Yeah.
from re, which is again, and sentire, to feel anger again and again and again until we become paralyzed. So that's not a
Right.
good thing. So we want to move past that to forgiveness. But then, just as the example of like, hey, I forgive you for making my life miserable, uh, we have to recognize that forgiveness is a power play sometimes. And
Yeah.
it's also can be very patronizing, paternalistic. It's like, I forgive you for wronging me. Like as if like I hold propriety over what's right and wrong, you did
Right.
wrong. And morally, I'm able to forgive you because I'm so wonderful.
Yeah.
And and so I think as you kind of already noted, like forgiveness has a lot of judgment in it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
Or
so the way I
traditional
see
way
it,
of thinking. Yeah.
yeah. So the way I see it is that we create the problem through judgment, and then we create the solution through forgiveness.
Mm.
So like forgiveness is actually impossible without judgment. You can't forgive someone unless you first judge them. So so what I recommend people do is to think about going beyond forgiveness. And the way I think a good way to think about that is think about back when, so I say this to your listeners, think about back when you were in elementary school or high school or college, or you were in an acting troupe or on a sports team, and you had the greatest teacher you've ever had in your life. Like you had someone who really made an impact in your life and on you, on your values, on the way you approach life or education or sports or dancing or whatever it is that's really important to you, right?
Right.
And and imagine that you're back in their classroom or their dance studio, or their theater, and before you're going to leave your interaction with them and move on with your life to the next stage, you have the opportunity in this visualization to turn back toward them and say something to them. What would you want to say? Right? And so what most people in my conferences say is thank you.
Yeah. The
Like
gratitude
thank
part,
you.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for what you've done for me and for helping me. And so what's interesting is that we reserve gratitude for others who have done what we consider positive things for us,
Right.
or that
Judgment again, right?
positively influenced us.
Yeah.
But I think the reality is that we can be grateful for others for jumping in the ring with us and helping us learn. And
Yeah.
sometimes it's not always by through a positive example or
Right.
positive
Right.
reinforcement. Because I'll tell you, like we think about intimacy. You can't learn how to have an intimate relationship by studying it.
Right.
You got to get out there and try it.
Yeah.
And with each person you learn, okay, that doesn't work. I'm looking more for this than that.
Right.
Maybe you see a few things that you like, and gradually, if you're fortunate, you start to really move toward a place where you're able to find someone that really where it's a real fit. They really meet your needs and vice versa. So, Neil Donald Walsh, the author, he had his in one of his books, he had this story of there's this angel in heaven, and the angel is saying to God, like, hey, I, I'm responsible. I'm a guardian angel for these human beings, but I really don't understand suffering. So I think I need to go down to earth and I need to experience what it's like to suffer. And
Mm.
by doing that, I think I'll be able to do my job better as a guardian angel. And so God says, okay, well, so he looks around at all the other angels and says, okay, he tells them the situation. He said, would one of you be willing to go down with this angel to earth and help this angel experience suffering? And this other angel says, okay, I'll do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the first angel goes up to him and says, "You really do that for me? Why would you do that?" And the second angel says, "Because I love you."
Yeah.
And I think this is the thing is that other people, I don't think people like come into our lives with the intention to hurt us, but sometimes there's something about the way we interact or where they are in their own personal evolution where we end up feeling really hurt. And I think if we can see, so one of the messages of Walsh's message is like God sends us nothing but angels. Like that there are people who come in and they help us to enjoy our and live our values and enjoy our lives. Other people come in, they don't really bring so much enjoyment. You ever heard that saying, like
Yeah.
some
They bring
people
challenge, right?
they
Yeah.
bring challenge.
Right.
So
Right.
some people bring joy wherever they go, others bring joy whenever they go, right? So there's, you know,
I have not heard
so
that, but yeah.
yeah, so I think it's being able to move beyond forgiveness. So I would rather, instead of someone saying to me, like, I forgive you for what happened in our relationship, if I'd much rather hear, I'm grateful to you for what happened in
Hmm.
our relationship. It helped me to realize what I was really needing in my life, and when
Yeah.
and help me to move forward, move closer to and understand my values.
Another way I would think about forgiveness is maybe it's my therapist mind, but I tend to think every situation is co-created, and part of forgiveness is
Hmm.
realizing I've had a role in this. It's not like
Hmm.
just you're bad. It's like we've been through something and I can see my part, and part of forgiving you is realizing I've got some
Like owning
responsibility or
owning owning your
accountability.
part
Yeah,
in it.
exactly.
Ab-
And that's what opens me up to also then, forgive you for your part conceivably,
Well, that's exactly right, Jessa. And what I would say my favorite exercise from Love and Suffering is one where I asked the reader, I said to write down the person you're having trouble forgiving, write down write down the things they did that are really just unforgivable for you.
Hmm.
So the reader, and I do this at my conferences, they write down, okay, they cheated on me, they were unfaithful, they forgot my birthday, they all different things that the other person did.
Hmm.
And then and then okay, now in the second column I want you to write down what's the character quality you associate with that behavior. And so they'll write down, okay, well, they cheated on me, so they're unfaithful, they forgot my birthday, so insensitive, selfish, and so
Hmm.
forth. They're all the character qualities.
Right.
And then, okay, now for the hard part. Say from the third column,
Yeah, I know what's coming.
you know it's coming. Okay, yeah, you're a therapist. You know exactly. So in the third column, uh, for each of those character qualities, write down who at whatever different times in your life, who would attribute that same character quality to you.
Yeah.
And when people do this, this so me, I grew up with a physically abusive stepfather. Like when a man comes into your home, beats you up, and sleeps with your mother, you don't feel like much of a person. And that's how I grew up.
Okay.
And I had very low self-esteem. And I resented my stepfather, who it turns out I found out later, which was a good thing because I probably would have done something really, really bad if I had known when I was like 15 when it happened. But he actually pushed my mother over sort of over a bench and broke her leg in three places. And I think if I had known that, yeah, it's probably good.
Ugh.
And anyway, I resented him for so long, and and again, resentment is paralysis, right? So my
Hmm.
career was not going anywhere. I was
Right.
kind of stuck, and And so I went to Patagonia in Argentina, and I traveled by myself for a couple weeks, just hiking long days in the forests, and and it was at that point I really knew I needed to forgive him to go
Hmm.
forward in my life. And and what one of the strategies in love and suffering is that to forgive is to give for. So when we forgive someone, we forgive them by giving for them to ourselves.
Mm.
So we put ourselves in their shoes and we say, okay, this person was not able to give me what I needed from them. Certainly I didn't need to get be physically abused in my own home, right?
Right. Right.
And and so how can I give for him to myself? What is it? Are there other dimensions of his character or her character that actually were positive in my life? And how, how can I like give for myself what's been missing and do that for myself rather than them giving it for me? And that helped me a lot to be able to see. And I did that exercise, and I realized that okay, so this was an unemployed journalist who essentially felt like chewed up and spit out by society, and the only way he could claim any semblance of power was to abuse a young boy, right? He
Hmm.
was like 11 years old. So that's what sort of pushed him in that direction. Now, a lot of another, I think, another sort of piece of conventional wisdom that I think we have all wrong is the sort of we taught as kids like forgive and forget, right?
Yeah.
And I'd
Right.
say no, no, forgive and remember,
Yeah.
right? Don't
Yeah.
don't remember and think about it every day or something like that, but file it away and know. Like if you're walking at night and you fall into a ditch, like how would you feel if someone said to you, you know what, the best thing is forget the location of the ditch?
Yeah.
No, I don't
Right.
think that's a good
Right. Right.
idea, right? So you remember where it is, but you file it away and you find ways to move on. And so I think there's a really you'll like this because this really relates to therapy. I think there's a really critical difference between forgiveness and trust. So
Yes.
forgiveness is for personal development. We need to forgive to become unstuck.
Right.
Trust is for relationship development.
Yes.
So, in other words, forgiveness is saying, okay, I'm going to give for the other person to myself. I'm going to move on in my life. Trust is, well, I'm going to not only, well, it's different from forgiveness, but it's basically saying, I'm going to make myself vulnerable again with this specific person in this specific context. And in my case, I didn't choose to trust him again. I didn't choose to renew a
Yeah.
relationship. I mean, I chose to move on, but that enabled me to say, hey, I'm actually grateful. And you would ask, how could I be grateful for literally, he almost, he threw me
Yeah.
down into a banister, almost broke my back when I was a kid. How would I be grateful for that? Like I couldn't walk right for a week. Well, the reason I'm grateful is because this may sound strange, but I have a really deep feeling that if it weren't for him, I'd be having my fourth affair on my third wife, driving a
W-
red sports car, and I wouldn't even know my children.
Wow.
Because that's kind of I've always had a kind of very like strategic mind. I could think through different alternatives, figure out ways to navigate situations. And instead, I'm here talking with you about love and forgiveness, right? I mean, it's like I'm writing books on personal development. I'm teaching leadership, and I enjoy what I'm doing. I don't feel, so it's kind of like I think. In fact, if we look at the word passion, a lot of people don't know this, but the etymology of the word passion, it comes from the Latin pati or patire, which means to suffer. So we have like in Christianity, we
Mm.
have the crucifixion, the suffering, the passion of Christ. In African American culture, we have the phoenix rising from the ashes. In many religious and cultural traditions, we have this construct of beauty coming out of challenge and trauma.
Yeah. And pain.
And so I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm grateful to him because
Hmm.
I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now. I wouldn't be living the life the way I'm living it now. And we don't get a chance to rewind. I mean, I wouldn't put myself through it again, right?
Right.
But but at the same time, sometimes when we suffer, we also learn, compassion. Compassion is from calm, which is with, and passion, suffering. A lot of people especially therapists, not you, I'm sure, but a lot of therapists also make this mistake, is that we think compassion means to suffer with. When we suffer with others, we lose our capacity to help them. I
Yeah.
think compassion is to be with others in their suffering.
Right.
And when we
Right.
observe others suffering and if something really touches us, where we say, okay, I want to really help others so they don't suffer like that anymore.
Yeah.
Like for example, I had a one of my former clients was a marketing director of a Fortune 100 pharmaceutical company, and she came to see me and she said, she said, Anthony, I I I can't stand my job. Like I really don't enjoy it. It's hard for me to even wake up and go in there. What can we do? And so so I asked her, I said, well, tell me about how you grew up. Tell me what you've experienced in your life. And we talked about it. And she said, well, my childhood was really tragic. I mean, really, it was my mother and I, the two of us nurturing my father before he passed away from cancer when I was 12. And so I helped her to make a career change. And whenever I ask people, sometimes people will go, well, what is she doing now? Some people say, a nurse. No, she's not a nurse. She's a director of a major hospital,
Mm.
leading a team of researchers to find cures to cancer and other diseases so fewer families suffer the way hers does.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even, if I take my own example with the physical abuse I experienced, feeling powerless as a kid, what it wakes me up in the morning? It's I want to help others feel powerful. Like
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of people we walk around. I'm sure you see this in your therapy when you're working with clients. Like a lot of people walk around with their hands covering their eyes and they lament the darkness.
Yeah.
And I want to help people remove their hands from their eyes and see the light, see the love that's out there, that's around them. But they just have to be able to see it.
Yeah. And if I think where my brain would go is if you had not done this forgiveness and this work, you might be somebody looking for power over, right? If you were still carrying that resentment, you'd still be playing this out. I mean, I guess I'd like to hear your thoughts on how resentment, lack of forgiveness affects our intimate relationships. Whether it's our partner we need to forgive or it's somebody we grew up
Mm.
with.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I just published an article in Personality and Individual Differences, a psychology journal, around narcissistic leaders and how they become lonely. And I think you're really onto something here, Jessica, because I think that when people are unable to forgive, what happens is, again, they become stuck. What happens when we become stuck? It's like tying a knot inside of us. And so we become kind of hermetic, kind of sealed off from others. And then just like my former stepfather, what is it that gives us a sense of power, a sense of like raison d'etre, a sense like of existential purpose? It's often we don't have one, we can't
Yeah.
find it, and so we look for power over to give us like to feed that insecurity. And I think we see a lot of political leaders doing this today, like this sort of power over. Yeah,
Yeah.
we see, and I think the thing is this is how narcissistic leaders and narcissistic individuals become lonely because it's hard to sustain a relationship with people like that.
Yeah.
And so in an intimate relationship or as a leader in an organization, people don't stick around because the only way that person is going to attempt to feel secure, which they're doing all the time. They're trying to prove themselves over and over and over again. So like Carol Dweck's work on personality change, the malleability of personality, the growth mindset.
Right.
We people that are high in narcissism, they tend to believe that personality is fixed, which
Ah,
means if someone insults them, then they have to retaliate. Whereas if you believe personality is dynamic, that your personality can change over time, which actually has been proven at this point,
right.
not every single person, but it's also there's this kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. If you believe your
Yeah,
personality can
exactly.
change,
Willingness or openness to change would make a
exactly.
big difference, right? Yeah.
Exactly. So if someone insults me, instead of thinking like, okay, I got to show them, power over. I got to show them who's dominant here. Instead, I can say, well, maybe there's something to learn from what they've shared because I'm growing.
Yeah.
Some people go through life and other people grow through life. And so you can say, okay, well, I'm growing and maybe there's something to learn here. Maybe there's not. But either way, I don't need to dwell on this. I don't need to retaliate because there's a saying like, he or she who angers me controls me. It's a Chinese proverb,
Yeah.
right? So we get into that conflict when it's at the end, we don't often need to choose it.
Yeah, we sort of give our power away. So, would you say, when I think about why relationships fail or struggle or why somebody might feel lonely, is resentment slash forgiveness that plateau the most crucial one? Or are they all sort of equally relevant?
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I haven't like done like a quantitative study looking at like which one, and the
I guess I'm asking for your
weighted
gut
averages.
feeling on it, right?
Yeah, my gut feeling is that, well, first of all, my gut feeling is that love is the most important of all of them.
Mm,
And it's also the hardest to reach. But
yeah.
love, we manifest love through giving. And the thing about loneliness is loneliness tends to also have some correlation with narcissism. Because
Mm,
it's, you think about it, loneliness is like, why are others treating me this way? Why am I not receiving from others what I need from them socially? So, what many people who are lonely do not ask is, well, others must be also feeling very lonely, and what can I do to reduce
yeah.
their loneliness?
Yeah.
So, in other
Yeah.
words, we focus on what we're receiving from others, which is the caring card of the narcissist, rather than how we can give to others. And the thing is, it puts us in a powerless position. It's power over and it's powerless because here's the thing, each of us has zero control over what we receive from others.
Right.
Like whether we want approval, money, status, we have no control over it. We have 100% control over what we give, how we give, to whom we give it to, how much we give it, when we give it. And so I would say when we start moving away from loneliness and we start moving toward love, and that begins with acceptance. So acceptance is really, as a psychologist, Freud, one of the biggest causes of psychopathology is experiential avoidance, is like avoiding the sort of reality, like acknowledging the reality around us, avoiding the feelings within us, and sort of fighting those really challenging emotions, including loneliness. So loneliness, like, why did you come here today? Like, what can I learn from you?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that loneliness can really be an impetus for change. Any of these emotions can, but only if we first accept them. And then
Yeah.
once we accept them, we're no longer fighting against them. And at this point, we can actually use that feeling as a kind of like to propel us towards self-directed change.
Hmm. What did we have to on the plateaus? What did you have to overcome for love?
Okay, so that's the toughest one.
Okay.
Okay, so we overcome suffering to reach acceptance, resentment to reach forgiveness, which we've talked about, judgment to reach gratitude, which we've also talked about. We overcome what I call incarceration to
Oh,
reach a
right.
state of love. So this is incarceration is rooted in Melanie Klein, like projective identification, where we and this is I think is a really important distinction. So let's use an example. Okay, so one of my former clients, Maria, I call her in Love and Suffering. So her boyfriend cheated on her. And so she felt a tremendous amount of suffering around that, and really like didn't know what to do with her life. Eventually she left him, and at a certain point she had to accept. She went then to acceptance, accepting like, okay, actually, but this point she'd already gained like 30 pounds, and before she was able to say to herself, okay, I need to accept that I'm alone now.
Hmm.
And this relationship didn't work. I had so much hopes for this relationship. It did not work out. And then she realized that she still resented her ex so much. And so the feeling that anger again and again and again, becoming paralyzed. And so she realized she needed to forgive, just like I realized with my ex stepfather I had to forgive him. She also had the similar process, and so I worked with her, and she was able to essentially say, okay, I can like give for him to myself, and realize that he had other wonderful qualities, just fidelity wasn't one of them,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so she gets into forgiveness, and then from there she realizes that, well, she still judges him though. She still feels like she judges him for being unfaithful to her. At this point, she's now met another guy, right? So she's going out with this guy who's like an accountant, and very solid guy. And she's she's now judging her ex for having been unfaithful.
Hmm.
And then and so what how she goes from there to gratitude and then to incarceration, it kind of it didn't follow a linear path, is
Okay.
that she starts to realize. So the way incarceration works is when we judge someone, what we do is we collapse that individual into one character quality.
Mm,
So essentially, we think of that person as just having this one character. So ex-boyfriend, unfaithful,
right.
right? And so what she does, and this is what we do, is we run to the opposite of that. So while he's unfaithful, she's going to look for someone who's faithful, and she's going to be faithful herself. So as she was screening other men to date, being faithful, trusting was number one, right? So
Yeah, so still the past is dictating how you see and experience what's possible for you now, right? You're still being controlled by that
that's right.
infidelity.
Exactly. It's exactly right. And so you're just seeing, and in fact, you're taking a sort of holistic um, kind of constellation of character qualities that a human being is, and you're limiting them to just one character quality. And so you just say, so she's now choosing this next guy because he's faithful. But what she realizes is that, so there's one of the quotes in Love and Suffering is that what you don't learn to love in your life, you will repeat.
Hmm.
And when you judge someone, when you judge someone, you essentially you already are or will become what you judge. And this is what happens because her at her moral center for Maria is not about just faithful, unfaithful. It's also about being empathetic, or it's also about being kind. It's also about being authentic. And she realizes that because everything's been about being faithful or unfaithful, she's now chosen this guy who's faithful. But truth be told, she realizes, and actually once she's forgiven, and not just forgiven her ex, but now that she's not judging him, feeling grateful for her ex, she starts to realize, you know what? He was actually very attentive to me. He was very empathetic and
Mm,
and nurturing. But you know what? I was kind of unfaithful to him emotionally.
mm,
I was hanging out with all my friends from work. I didn't pay so much attention to him, didn't spend that much time with him. And, I guess, it wasn't right what he did, but that was the only way he knew to end what was not functioning for either of us.
mm.
And so she didn't condone it, but at the same time, she realized that he did have some wonderful qualities. And now she starts to look at her current boyfriend and she's like, okay, yeah, he's very solid, but you know what? He's up all night playing fantasy football and he's out with his friends and I can trust him, but he doesn't really ask me about myself. He doesn't really care that
Yeah.
much about
Yeah.
me. And so eventually she ends up leaving him. And as she starts to move more toward love, she's able to find someone that is not just faithful, but also has this sort of constellation of character qualities like
Yeah.
empathetic, authentic, and other. And I think that's what happens, that we kind of limit ourselves to just trying to kind of save ourselves from whatever that negative character quality is that we experienced. And then and the projective identification is we sort of like push on to others the character qualities that we're not willing to admit also exist within ourselves.
Yeah.
You know?
Really fascinating conversation. I appreciate it. So tell people where they can find the book, and I think where they can reach out to you. What else you want to mention that you have available?
Okay, sure. Thanks, Jessa. So, to find Love and Suffering, you can find it on Amazon or wherever books are sold.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then to find, I'd like to offer two free books to your listeners, and the two books are one is called. They're also a combination of stories and psychological research, recent studies, but they're really like about people's experiences more than anything. And the first book is called The Myth of Happiness: How Your Definition of Happiness Creates Your Unhappiness.
Mm,
And the second book is called, and it's kind of some of the themes we talked about here around loneliness, The Myth of Friendship: How Your
mm,
Misunderstandings About Friendship Keep You Lonely. So to find these books, just go to my website, which is theartoflivingfree.org, and then you put slash free happiness and friendship books. So it's again, theartoflivingfree.org slash free happiness and friendship books. And then you just literally put in your email, you get a confirmation email, you confirm, and then you get the download links.
Yeah, I'll put that link in the notes so people, if they're driving or
Yeah.
running or whatever, they don't have to remember, but
Thank you, Jessa. Yeah,
I'll
I
stick that
appreciate
in
it.
there. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Jessa. I really enjoyed our conversation. Appreciate you.